The solar panels that are typically used for home installations are silicon-based panels. They have a characteristic checkerboard appearance. Each cell of that checkerboard contains a piece of silicon sliced off of the same ingots that are used to make computer chips. They're sliced very, very thin, and then a copper grid of very thin wires is printed on the front and back sides, so that when the photons from the sun hit the silicon, it can lock loose electrons, which the copper wires pick up. All the cells in a panel are wired together in series, and then typically all the panels in an array are wired together in series, until eventually you have a couple hundred volts of DC power. Solar panels are like batteries, and they make DC power, not AC, so that power is sent down to something called the inverter box, whose job it is to turn the DC into AC that you can either use in your home or sell back to MG&E to the grid. The main thing that I do when I come out to your house to do an assessment is something called measuring the solar window. The sun follows a different path during the summer months than it does during the winter months. The sun's been very high in the sky lately. It's been rising and setting way to the north. As we get closer, deeper into winter, we'll stay very low in the sky and will rise and set very far to the south. Because of that, the effect of a chimney, a tree, a dormer, a peak of the next door neighbor's house, the effect of that on the production your solar panels will make varies depending on the time of day and the time of year that shadow hits the panels. For an example, an hour's worth of sunlight at noon on the summer solstice at the very top of the picture on the right has more than twice as much energy as an hour's worth of sun at the winter solstice near the bottom of the picture. The same thing happens early and late in the day. The sun is low in the sky and has to go through a lot more air, so the energy contained in the sun when it gets to your roof is a lot less early and late in the day. So to measure this properly, I have a camera that takes a series of pictures across the sky. The computer splices those photos into a big 220-degree panoramic view and puts this grid of hours and months on top of the photo. It can then step through hour by hour, month by month, saying, okay, light space, light space, light space, those are all clear hours. Here's a dark space, that's an hour of shade. It then looks up in a database for our latitude to see how strong the sun is, how much energy the sun has at that hour of that month. It also looks up in a second database for MadiSUN, Wisconsin, what percentage of the time do we have cloudy weather during that hour of that month. So by going through the whole year hour by hour, it's able to compute the weighted average of all the sunlight that is aimed at your house, what percentage actually gets to the roof to do useful work. Solar electric panels are fairly sensitive to even small amounts of shading, and so we ideally want to see something maybe less than about 10% shading over the roof of your house to be a really good location, an excellent location for solar. Above 10%, heading to 15 and 20%, you start to see the years to pay back get longer, the return on investment gets to be less. And once you get over 20 to 25% shading, the amount of electricity produced by the panels really is low enough it's probably not a desirable location. So a major part of my assessment is to do that measuring, to run all the data through the computer, and to give you a fairly simple graphical and numeric representation of how good your solar window is over your house. Excuse me. Taking that percentage of shading, I also use a couple of spreadsheets from Focus on Energy that go through year by year and calculate the predicted savings and the predicted generation of power that your system is going to create over the 25-year life of the system. That spreadsheet spits out two numbers that I feature in the report that I'll send you. One is the years to payback, and the other is the return on investment. I think the return on investment is a better measure of how good an investment a solar energy system is. It represents an alternative case, on the one hand, of putting X thousand dollars in the bank in a savings account versus putting X thousand dollars worth of solar panels on your roof. The number represents the interest rate that the bank would have to pay you every year for 25 years to give you the same net payback that solar gives you on your roof. Currently, for a residential taxpayer, that's about 4 to 4.5% return on investment over the life of the system. That's quite a bit better than the kind of CDs you can get at most banks these days, which are more like in the range of 0.3 and 0.5%. And so solar, just looking at it strictly from a financial point of view, and even ignoring any environmental attributes it may have, solar is actually at this point starting to make sense as a good financial investment. For residential buildings, especially older ones that may have been added onto, that may have a lot of dormers and large chimneys, solar collector placement can sometimes be tricky. For good performance, a solar electric panel needs to face as close to due south as possible. You can go approximately 45 degrees either way from due south and only suffer a modest loss of production, maybe 5 or 6%. But beyond that, the reduction in annual output starts to grow pretty dramatically past 45 degrees. Ideally, your roof should be sloped between about 30 and 35 degrees to give maximum production, but fortunately, that particular angle is not so critical. A typical 412 pitched roof, common on ranch-style houses in this part of the country, at about 19 degrees is still within a couple percentage points of the output that a perfect roof gives. So the important thing is to be facing mostly south. The roof angle is less important, but another very important factor is any shading that may come from other parts of your roof, from your neighbor's roof, or from any trees in the vicinity. If for some reason your roof is not suitable, another possibility, if you have a deep backyard with no trees, is to do a pole-mounted system. These slides show fixed mount systems. They face due south all year at approximately 30 to 35 degrees. Last option for residential applications, if your roof is not suitable for some reason, is to build a solar pergola on the backyard. Many people think they're much more attractive than a pole mount. You can build a more or less traditional pergola, but simply slope the roof about 20 degrees and then bolt the solar panels on top. This gives you a nice shady place to put a barbecue or a hammock, and it gives you a place to put the solar panels that may not have the issues that your roof might possibly have with structural integrity issues or shade from nearby trees. I believe that's the last of my
Yeah, stuff. And Larry, that's one of the things that we've talked about with this in previous presentations is that the slide you see here, it's a fairly smaller system, right? This is just to kind of give people perspective. One of the limitations of these kind of systems is that you're probably only looking at about 1.5 to 2 kilowatt size.
That would be an upper limit probably. This particular one is about 1.5, 1.6 kilowatts. When you start to get much larger than that at 2 kilowatts, you're not really looking at a solar pergola, you're more looking at a solar carport, which is not unthinkable, but it starts to get to be a large area.
Certainly. Larry, we did get one question from Aaron about his roof. He says, my roof faces or points towards the east and the west at about 12 to 15 degrees grade. How, not optimal for angle for solar, would you use the mounts to optimize the angle? Are there options to mount the panels on a dual-axis tracking system?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Houses whose roofs face east-west are very challenging for solar electric. It's theoretically possible to mount the panels on racks so that even though they're on a surface that faces east or west, they get tilted up toward the south so that they effectively face southeast-ish, more or less. And that's doable. The catch is that there's actually two catches. One is that it increases the cost. You have to pay the installer to create the racks and assemble and mount them. It also reduces the amount of available space because the first row of racks on the southern edge of the roof casts a shadow that makes the second row be spaced back a number of feet. So you suffer about a 40% loss of roof space in order to leave enough space between rows not to shadow each other. The final issue is that when you do that, you put them up off the roof. The building code says that if they're parallel to the roof within 6 inches, there's no additional wind loading analysis required. But when you tip them up off the roof, you have to hire a professional engineer to evaluate the wind loading issues, and you'll almost undoubtedly discover that your rafters have to be beefed up because the wind loading is going to be substantial in that kind of case. So by and large, east and west facing roofs are just really not a terribly suitable location for solar electric panels. It's very difficult to do it cost effectively and structurally in a way that's sound. As far as the two-axis tracker is concerned, excuse me, as I said, that's usually not attractive in a residential area because they make their extra electricity when they've swiveled down fairly low toward the horizon. And most residential neighborhoods, you don't have a clear view to the horizon. There's too many trees in neighboring houses. You could do a pole-mounted non-tracking that faces due south if you can get back past the house so the shadow of the house itself isn't blocking the panels. That's sometimes an aesthetic issue. Yourself, your spouse, your neighbors may not think it's as attractive, but from a technical point of view, it actually works quite well.
Larry, we got another question from Karen. She asks, how big is a standard size solar panel on length and width?
They really aren't standardized. They vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, but you can roughly figure approximately 3 by 5 feet.